everyone must get involved to correct some of the things that are really wrong, you know. And there are things that are wrong, you'd admit it. I do, because I see the truth. Makes them twist their minds, you know, and they talk about watermelon and rolling their eyes. It's just young Stephen Fetchits and Mantan Moreland's repeat, that's all.
That friction ran between them. And he was always trying to tell Red how to be funny. That is so...
But I won't go that direction. I turned down 2 major roles in a Broadway show this year. 2 important roles in a Broadway show, 1 role in a movie that would have made a difference to me, but I just couldn't accept the part that they offered me. You know?
Redd Foxx was an enigmatic figure in the world of comedy and entertainment. Born John Elroy Sanford, he rose to fame as one of the most influential African-American comedians of his time. With his unique style, quick wit, and ability to push boundaries, he became a beloved icon in the comedy scene. Despite his fame, his outspokenness on Hollywood matters always landed him on the wrong side of the industry, and this cost him his money and finally his life.
I hear some of my own material on television, and they won't let me do it, but still another guy can go on the show and do it. You know, it's really funny, you know.
They never did treat him with the respect that he should have been, should have had. He should have had a right out of the show. And when Red gets out there and finds out all he has to do is walk across the back of this that anybody could have done, he becomes livid. The doctor comes out and says, Mrs. Fox, we've done all that we can do, and your husband is gone.
So why did Redd Foxx refuse to sell his soul to Hollywood, and how did he pay for it? Let's get into it. Redd Foxx was an American comedian known for his raunchy stand-up routines. His style of comedy, which featured foul language and highly adult subject matter, influenced generations of comics. While a struggling performer in New York City, Sanford adopted the name Redd Foxx. He performed comedy on the Chitlin circuit of African-American nightclubs during the 1940s and 50s. By the 1960s, recordings of his comedy acts had become enormously popular among African Americans, though his albums were considered too racy for white audiences and were rarely available in stores with predominantly white customers. Before passing away, he lived his last years in Las Vegas, where he had had a home for 21 years and made nightclub appearances when the spirit and the money moved him. His 3rd marriage had ended, and so he would stay at home and tried to recoup by sleeping all day. In addition to his home in Las Vegas, Foxx had houses in Los Angeles and in St. Louis. He also owned 3 Mercedes. But despite his popular and financial success, he was bitter about his career. He felt like he had been exploited by unscrupulous associates and victimized by what he saw as pervasive racism in the entertainment industry. He was even quoted saying, "I've been cheated more than most people because I'm gullible and I'm a target. My heart is open, and I listen to people, and I believe their sob stories." He always claimed that Hollywood was terrible, claiming the racial prejudice was as strong as the stench of a skunk's armpit. For years, his views on Hollywood affected every aspect of his career, denying him his due in financial compensation, opportunities, awards, and leverage. In fact, off stage, the comedian always seemed downright gloomy. In front of an audience, he was wickedly funny and as outrageous as possible. But back in his dressing room, Foxx always allegedly lapsed into a rather tired, dispirited mood. He was courteous, even courtly, but he seemed depressed. Whenever he was asked what he wanted for the future, he would shrug as if it didn't matter. "Not too much," he would say. "All you can gain is material things, and when you get to be 60, material things don't mean so much. You don't have that long left to enjoy them." He would then sigh and add, "I'd just like some peace of mind." A big spender who once owned a fleet of fancy cars, he made millions of dollars from Sanford & Son. But he filed for bankruptcy protection in 1983, citing mounting debts. His home and 7 of his vehicles were seized by the Internal Revenue Service for alleged failure to pay income taxes from 1983 to 1986, authorities said. The IRS filed liens on Foxx's property totaling $755,166.21, but they contended that the entertainer owed considerably more because of penalties and accumulated interest on the 4 years of unpaid taxes. Foxx lived in Las Vegas Vegas, where his comedy routine had become a staple of the nighttime entertainment circuit. Several years before, the comedian had lost other property, including some in Los Angeles, after declaring bankruptcy in 1983, as claimed by Robert Gianangeli, who was a spokesman for the IRS in Los Angeles. He said he would have asked his show business friends for help had he known the IRS was going to seize his property. I could have gotten in touch with Eddie Murphy, or Richard Pryor, or Frank Sinatra, or somebody who knows that, you know, I have been helpful to a lot of people. The star of the old TV series Sanford & Son said after IRS agents left him with only a bed at his home. Fox filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 1983, citing $1.6 million owed the IRS from taxes before 1983 and more than $800,000 owed to other creditors. More than 18 years after the comedian and actor died, Clark County Public Administrator John J. Cahill announced in 2010 that the rights to Fox's life story would be marketed, with details handled through a probate court. There had been wildly disparate offers, from $20,000 to $2 million, made for the rights in the past, Cahill said, but the negotiations never got beyond lunches, meetings, and talk. Fox lived in Las Vegas and was a showroom headliner there for years. He was buried in the city at Palm Memorial Gardens. Shortly before his death, the IRS foreclosed on his Eastern Avenue home, which was rumored to be haunted, Cahill said. Whoever would land the rights to Fox's rags to riches to rags again story would have plenty to work with, though he was perhaps best remembered for his portrayal of Fred Sanford in the 1970s sitcom Sanford and Son. He worked the Chitlin Circuit in the 1940s and 50s. The circuit was the name given to a series of venues considered safe for black performers in the racially segregated southern and eastern United States. Born John Sanford in 1922, his TV character was named in honor of a brother. Fox was known in his early years as Chicago Red, so he wouldn't be confused with his friend and fellow street hustler Detroit Red, who would go on to become civil rights activist Malcolm X. Fox died without a will, Cahill said, in debt and in trouble with the IRS. Comedian Eddie Murphy was even reported to have paid for Fox's lavish funeral. He still owed the IRS $3.5 million, but even if the rights sell for millions, it won't solve Clark County's economic problems. He said, if a movie producer pays $1 million to tell Red's story, the county will get about $21,150. We have always been confident that the estate owns the rights to Fox's life story, he said, but there have been questions and some confusion in the past. When buyers come to the table, it's important that the rights are clear and available. Cahill said the goal is to settle Red's estate, pay all taxes owed, and get money for his heirs. Fox did not have biological children, but he adopted Debrica Fox, the daughter of Betty Jean Harris, who was the second of Fox's 4 wives. Debrica was once the administrator to the estate. He was also married to Ka Ho Cho for the last 3 months of his life. She and Debrica are believed to be Fox's sole heirs, Cahill said. While it is common for public administrators in Nevada to hold estate auctions, they are usually announced in the local newspaper and are quiet affairs. Rarely does someone as famous as Fox die without a will, or so broke, so the services of someone like Cahill are not required. But the IRS lien was still on Fox's estate in 2006 when a probate judge relieved Debrica Fox of her duties for unspecified reasons. The court put the estate into the domain of the public administrator. Cahill inherited the matter when he was elected in 2007. We were going through things, and this popped up, he said. I noticed not much was going on and asked my staff why it was still open. Not long afterward, a potential buyer and an unidentified Hollywood actor met with Cahill and made a $20,000 offer. Soon afterward, a fast-talking guy made a $2 million offer. Neither got off the ground, but a seed was planted. We had no idea how to sell movie rights, said Cahill, adding in his statement that he was hiring professionals to market the deal. The deal will be put to auction in the courtroom. The terms, conditions, details, and rights will be locked, but the final offer by a qualified bidder will determine who wins. If a deal favors the buyer rather than the estate, it could get taken away at court by a higher bidder. In other words, the rights to the life story of Fox are being treated as real property. Write a lot about this, Cahill said. I want every producer in Hollywood to read read about this. But how did Red end up dying a broke man when he had once been a star on his own popular TV show called Sanford and Son? Well, he was among the first black actors to be blackballed by Hollywood for his controversial opinions. One of his controversial comedy lines on the show went like, "Sanford, listen, why don't you arrest some white drivers?" "Officer, I do." "Sanford, you do? Well, where are they? Look at all these N in here. Look around here." It's enough N in here to make a Tarzan movie. Through the laughs and the giggles, many did not realize that Red Fox took a touchy subject and made it comical. What was the touchiest subject? The N-word. Just barely a decade after the great Martin Luther King Jr.'s death in the civil rights movement, Fox tackled the one word that many found highly offensive. Some called it bold, others called it a lack of respect. Whatever the case was, his tell-it-like-it-is style allowed his audience to bond over a subject many would not dare laugh about in public. As he frequently mentioned in his show, he ain't afraid to give you one across the lips. This lack of fear to be bold transcended into his real life and his dealings with the opinions of the public about his word choice. Born in the nitty-gritty city of St. Louis, Missouri in 1922, Sanford grew up poor in the racially charged times of the United States. The things this once young boy used his eyes to see during this time period altered his perception on jokes and race. After beginning his life as a comedian at the young age of 13, Red Fox had finally found his voice. By the age of 25, he had become familiar with being frank within his comedic act on the Chitlin circuit. "We were poor. If I wasn't a boy, I wouldn't have had anything to play with." Audiences were used to hearing such comments as Fox made jest of us upbringing. It was here that his blue humor got its first start, being too crude for white audiences. Sanford's lewd jokes eventually earned him a spot on The Ed Sullivan Show, where his fame grew. Then in 1972, he was offered the chance to have his own television series, Sanford and Son. Another controversial moment on the show was when uttered the N-word again, and they refused to air it. Will you hurry up? You move slower than a fat woman in a cactus garden, barefooted, blindfolded. As usual, Fox wasted no time in making jokes in the opening of the episode Legal Eagle. His son Lamont then entered furiously and explained to his father that he had been given a ticket. From this point on, the writers of the show dissected the racial issues at hand, knowing that audiences at home would be able to relate. "You can get a ticket if the light is green, you black, and the cop is white." As Lamont stated this with an evident anger, Fred encouraged him to fight the ticket with the response, "You get a ticket from a white cop in a blue uniform, in a black neighborhood, make you so mad, you see red, and you ain't gonna fight it cause you too yellow. Now what are you, a man or a box of crayons?" The majority of the jokes within this episode were surrounding colors and the irony in the use of them. All of these jokes were kept in the aired episode, but when Fox uttered the N-word, the network refused to be a part of the ensuing controversy and removed that portion of the show. As with the archetypal court jester, Fox was unable to lie about subjects he felt were important. If the court jester attempted to do so, he would choke over the task or quit. In this case, it is best if they say everything that comes to their mind as it is. The archetypal court jester, being double-sided, also generated critical remarks and looks to dismiss the wisdom of others. Actor Peter Ustinov once remarked that comedy was a funny way of being serious. In Fox's attempt of seriousness, definitely generating criticism and controversy, he dismissed network executives' wisdom on how his character should be portrayed. Why joke with racially influenced issues? That was all Red Fox knew of firsthand. He had found what some define as a soft way to tell the truth. This softer way of telling the truth is what made Time magazine rank Sanford and Son as one of the 100 best TV shows of all time. After 5 successful years on the air, Sanford and Son took a bow out of television. By the time the dust settled on Fox, he had become more than well known for his humor and sense of directness. While Fox is now most familiar as the star of the popular television series Sanford and Son, his television career began late in his life. But before that show's debut in 1972, he was best known as the Dean of Blue Comics. A generation before such younger black comedians as Richard Pryor began skewering social taboos about race, and other delicate topics, he had made a name for himself with the kind of act you wouldn't take your mother to see unless you had a very hip mother. Before television stardom, Fox had played nightclubs for 37 years and made 54 party records, or spoken comedy with no music, a genre he says he originated in 1956. No one expected me to be on television because I had a reputation from the party records as X-rated, but that's the type of humor I liked, said Fox. That's the humor I heard in the ghettos. They didn't didn't pull any punches, and they didn't want to hear about Little Boy Blue and Cinderella, so I gave them what they wanted. I busted loose. Getting out of the dark. Busting loose appears to come naturally to Fox, who was born in St. Louis and grew up in Chicago. His father soon departed the scene and the family was poor. It was really rough, he says, and so he ran away when he was 13. I took a freight train with 3 other guys, he said. We got on top of the train and climbed inside, and the top locked. We found we were in a car full of onions. We cried from Chicago to Weehawken. Fox was even younger when he discovered what he wanted to do with his life. He claimed he wanted to do show business, saying, "When I was 7, I would tell jokes to the guys who worked for the moving van company on the corner. I got used to people laughing at me." He started out performing in a washtub band on street corners, and later moved on to the black vaudeville circuit. Success did not come easy, however, and he spent a considerable amount of time working as a dishwasher or sign painter in order to eat. For some years, show business gigs alternated with brief jail sentences for such offenses as stealing a bottle of milk and sleeping in a hallway. Despite the harsh circumstances, with the first of his party records, in 1956 he began to be heard by larger audiences. But it was not until the late 1960s that he and his material moved from primarily black clubs to frequent television guest appearances and Las Vegas. In 1970, he gave a memorable comic performance in the hit film Cotton Comes to Harlem, and soon afterward he was approached by television producer Norman Lear about starring in the American version of the popular British sitcom Steptoe and Son. In Sanford and Son, Fox played Fred Sanford. The name was taken from his brother, a junk dealer and widower living with his son in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles. The show was a major success, but a dispute between Fox and the producers over the direction of the show led to his departure in 1977. The Red Fox Comedy Hour and The Red Fox Show in 1986 followed, but both shows were short-lived. Fox occasionally made films, including Harlem Nights in 1989 with Eddie Murphy, but worked primarily as a Las Vegas headliner. Sanford and Son introduced viewers to other talented actors and comics generally sidelined by Hollywood because of their race, including cast members LaWanda Page as Aunt Esther, Whitman Mayo as Grady Wilson, Don Bexley as Bubba, and Lynn Hamilton as Fox's good-natured girlfriend Donna. Slappy White, who'd worked the comedy circuit with Fox, appeared occasionally on the series, as did Pat Morita of future The Karate Kid movie fame, whose character's name, Achu, and his ethnicity were punchlines for Fred. While Sanford and Son regularly delivered such racial barbs, it rarely delved into racism or other third-rail issues, politics among them, that were central to All in the Family and its spin-off Maude. Was that deliberate? Yes, we didn't compare All in the Family and Sanford and Son, but the characters called it like they saw it in their own neighborhoods, Lear said in an email. The show begat other sitcoms about working-class black families, including Good Times, also involving Lear and starring Esther Roll and John Amos, and the less successful What's Happening from Yorkin, who died in 2015. Back then, Lear's The Jeffersons was rare in featuring an affluent black couple. While black viewers finally got to see a version of themselves on screen, it was mostly one limited to those in struggling neighborhoods and created by almost uniformly white producers, writers, and directors at the behest of white executives. That's in sharp contrast to the 21 St. Century comedies created and steered by black writers, producers, and actors, including ABC's Black, HBO's Insecure, and FX's Atlanta, and their wide-ranging and nuanced views of black life. Eric Deggans, TV critic for National Public Radio, sees a double-edged quality to the older generation sitcoms. They showcased performers beloved by black audiences, and, starting with Sanford and Son, proved that a series about a family of color could be widely successful. The comedies also were honest about depicting some real-life black challenges, Deggans said, but they ultimately relied on racial stereotypes and settled for laughs. The shows made poor areas look livable and even fun, as opposed to the issues that they really faced, Deggans said.